Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. Today, I finally get to show you how the Ryzen 9 3950X performs. Earlier this year at the Computex trade show, Tim and myself, we weren't too sure if you'd actually see the 16-core AM4 CPU this year. In fact, we both guessed that you probably wouldn't. It'd come sometime next year, probably early next year. But anyway, AMD quickly put that one to rest, officially announcing the 3950X at the E3 Expo just a week or two later. It was originally due to hit shelves in September, but AMD decided to push the release back 2 months, and now it will go on sale on the 25th of November. So basically you'll have loads of information regarding things like performance more than a week in advance. So that's quite nice. And that's also good news, as the 3950X isn't cheap. Though I suppose even at $750 US, it kind of is relative to the Intel competition. The 8-core 1900K, for an example, that currently retails for $500 US. So there you're paying 50% more for 100% more cores. And that means this will probably end up being a rather good deal. But anyway, before we get too far into it, today's video is sponsored by Deepcool and their Castle 360EX all-in-one liquid cooler. It incorporates Deepcool's patented anti-leak technology for improved reliability, while the large 360mm radiator and trio of TF120S fans ensure optimal performance. Complementing the performance is an RGB light show like no other. This is without a doubt one of the most visually stunning coolers on the market, and for that added peace of mind, the Castle 360EX is also backed by a 3-year warranty. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Okay, so the 3950X really does look to bridge the gap between mainstream and high-end desktop platforms, at least existing high-end desktop platforms. 3rd gen Threadripper will change that later this month, but the point is, never before have we had such an extreme CPU on a mainstream platform. And this is certainly the most expensive mainstream platform CPU we've seen in a very long time. For example, the Core i7-2600K, that came in at just $320 US. The Core i7-4790K, that retailed for $340 US, so $20 US over previous models. And then we had the 8700K, which pushed up to $360 US. And of course, now we have the Core i9-1900K, and that's at around $500 US. The Ryzen 9 3900X, that was kind of a big deal, matching Intel at the $500 price point, and legitimately so, not like what we saw with the Ryzen 7 1800X, which was released at $500 US but wasn't really a $500 US part, and was quickly discounted down to around $300 US. But the 3950X goes well beyond that, and it's now AMD who very much commands a price premium for desktop computing. But is their new 16-core 32-thread monster worth the asking price? Given what we've seen from the 3900X already, you'd think it would be worth the price premium, especially for those that can put those extra cores to work, but of course we'll run a few tests to get to the bottom of it. In terms of specifications, you probably know already all there is to know about the 3950X, as it has been officially announced by AMD, and we've got things like the clock speeds, the core counts, the TDP, all that kind of stuff. And really, with the exception of the core count and clock speeds, on paper it is identical to the 3900X. But obviously, as I've said, you get 16 cores opposed to 12, and the boost clock speed has been raised by 100 MHz, presumably due to the 3950X getting better silicon. But in order to keep within the 105 watt TDP, the base clock has been dropped from 3.8 GHz down to 3.5 GHz, but I am expecting the all-core frequency to be very similar. Another difference between these two CPUs is the packaging. Whereas the 3900X comes bundled with the Wraith Prism RGB box cooler, the 3950X doesn't come with a cooler at all, so you will need to factor in the cost of a cooler into your budget. For testing, I'm using the Corsair Hydro X cooling gear on the Gigabyte X570 Aorus Extreme, and for the block I've used the XC7. Then we have the XR5 360mm radiator and the XD5 pump/reservoir combo, and all of this has been thrown on the Praxis wet bench. Eventually I'll upgrade this into a proper test case, but for now, due to limited time, this is what we have to work with. I've also used this setup to retest the 3900X, 3800X and 3700X using the latest AGESA 1.0.0.4 BIOS revision. Once again, I am using DDR4 3200CL14 memory for all the current AMD and Intel processors. Speaking of Intel processors, for the 8th and 9th gen Intel Core series, they were benchmarked on the Gigabyte Z390 Aorus Ultra, and they were cooled using the Corsair Hydro Series H115i RGB Platinum 280mm all-in-one liquid cooler. Please note the Intel CPUs are not TDP restricted, as that's not the out-of-the-box experience. So we're showing the absolute best case scenario for the Intel CPUs out of the box. Finally, the graphics card of choice is MSI's Gaming X Trio GeForce RTX 2080 Ti, as this helps remove any GPU bottlenecks when testing these CPUs. Okay, I think that about covers everything. Let's get into the benchmark results. Okay, that's quite the impressive Cinebench R20 score. You can see why Intel's been trying to heavily downplay Cinebench's relevance for CPU performance. The 3950X is a whopping 89% faster than the 9900K. So for those of you who use Maxon's Cinebench 4D, the 3950X is well and truly worth the premium over the 9900K. It was also 27% faster than the 3900X, and while that does make it slightly worse value, if time is money, that premium will be easily justified. While I suspect 2950X owners will be holding out for 3rd gen Threadripper, those of you thinking about snapping up a 2nd gen 16-core processor will want to get it for $500 or less, given the 3950X is almost 30% faster. Of course, the 2950X offers more PCI Express lanes, but if you can make do with an X570 board, then the 3950X will be the better option. The 4.7 GHz single-core max boost clock allowed the 3950X to score 529 points out of the box, and that's a 2% increase over the 3900X, which makes sense given it should clock around 2% higher in this test. Perhaps more impressive though is the fact that it actually edged out the 9900KS, making it the fastest desktop CPU in the single-core test. Here's a quick look at sustained memory bandwidth performance, and as expected, the 3950X is very similar to all other 3rd gen Ryzen CPUs that we've tested so far. WinRAR performance is drastically improved with 3rd gen Ryzen, but even so, the 12 and 16 core models still trail Intel's 8-core 9900K and are quite some way behind the 12-core 9920X. The 3950X didn't appear to improve upon the 3900X, which is interesting, though we saw a similar thing with Threadripper when comparing the 2920X and 2950X. The 3950X is just 2% faster than the 3900X in 7-zips compression test, and that meant while it was 8% faster than the 2950X, it was still 5% slower than the Core i9 9920X. However, it's decompression work where Ryzen has always excelled, and here the 3950X blows everything out of the water, beating the 9920X by an incredible 73% margin. It was also 25% faster than the 2950X and a little over 30% faster than the 3900X, so a great result for the new AM4 16-core processor. Unfortunately, we see little to no performance gain over the 3900X when it comes to encoding performance in Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2020 edition. When compared to the 3900X, the 3950X was just 3 seconds faster, which is surprising given they operated at very similar clock speeds in this test with CPU utilization over 90% for both parts. That said, if we compare each processor side by side in the Windows Task Manager, you can quite clearly see that 4 of the 3950X cores aren't being fully utilized, and this is why the 3950X can't further distance itself from the 3900X. The 3950X also performs well in the V-Ray benchmark, offering almost 30% more performance over the Core i9 9920X and over 80% more than the 9900K, so another really solid result here for the red team. Next up we have Corona, and here the 3950X was 25% faster than the 2950X, which is a huge step forward. This also meant it was almost 30% faster than Intel's Core i9 9920X, as well as the 12-core 3900X. It also blew Intel's mainstream 9900K out of the water, as it was 71% faster. The last application benchmark I ran was Blender Open Data, and here the 3950X offered a 29% improvement over the 3900X and 37% more performance than the 2950X. It also decimated the Core i9 9920X by a 56% margin and the 9900K by an 87% margin. It's also quite crazy to think that almost 3 years ago now, the Core i7 7700K was the flagship mainstream desktop part. And despite that, the 3950X is roughly 300% faster and only costs 130% more. Something very unusual about the 3950X, something that makes it rather special, is just how efficient it is. Despite offering 29% more performance than the 3900X in Blender, the 3950X actually consumed a few less watts. That's insane, to be honest. Absolutely insane. This also means for what amounts to an 87% performance boost over the 9900K, you're looking at identical power consumption. Now, these results might seem a bit too hard to believe, but I assure you I have triple checked them. The 3950X and 3900X, along with the other Ryzen processors, were tested on the same board, with the same BIOS, using the same settings and cooling. I also cross-referenced my results with Steve over at Gamers Nexus, and he found very similar power consumption figures, so I'm extremely confident in the accuracy of these results. So why does the 3950X only push total system consumption to the same level as the 3900X? In a word, binning. It's just better silicon and therefore can operate at much lower voltages. Whereas the 3900X typically ran at between 1.275 and 1.3 volts, the 3950X ran at just 1.15 volts. And this means the 3900X required around 13% more voltage on average. Combine this with a 3% increase in clock speed, and this is why the 3950X and 3900X consume similar levels of power. Okay, so it's time for some games, and please note, due to a 24-hour hardware lockout when making 5 CPU changes or more, I didn't get the chance to add the Threadripper CPUs to these results. This is something I'll do in a future video. First up, we have Battlefield 5 using the DirectX 12 API. Previously, I did test this title using DirectX 11, so all the results have been updated for this review and can't be compared to previous reviews. As you can see, the 3950X is a whisker faster than the 3900X, and that made it just a fraction slower than the 8700K and 9700K, while it was 12% slower than the 9900K when comparing 1% low performance. That said, it was almost 30% faster than the 9920X when comparing 1% lows, and for some reason, Intel's current high-end desktop CPUs often run into performance issues when gaming. Bumping the resolution up to a more realistic scenario at 1440p with an RTX 2080 Ti, the 3950X is now just 7% slower than the 9900K when comparing 1% low data, and again, it basically matched the 9700K and 8700K. Again, performance was much more consistent when compared to the Core i9 9920X. Performance when testing with Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a little lackluster. Here the 9900K was 16% faster for the average frame rate, while the 9920X was 11% faster. The 3950X was also just a single frame faster than the 3900X. That said, when jumping to 1440p, we find the limits of the RTX 2080 Ti when using the highest quality preset. This was achieved by not just the 3950X, but also the 3900X and 3800X, as well as the Intel Core i7 9700K and 9900KS. Oddly, despite being much faster at 1080p, the 9900K and 9920X fall slightly behind at 1440p, and we have seen this kind of thing before. The Ryzen 9 3950X performs very well in the Division 2 at 1080p, basically matching the average frame rate of Intel's best, while offering a slightly higher 1% low result, though this is very much in line with what the 3900X delivered. Quite bizarrely though, increasing the resolution seems to mess everything up for Ryzen, as well as Intel's Core i9 9920X. The 3950X is now up to 10% slower than the 9700K, 9900K, and 8700K. This is a very unexpected result given what we saw at 1080p. The 3950X is very competitive in Ghost Recon Breakpoint, pushing the 2080 Ti within a few frames of what was achieved with the 9900KS, while maintaining the same 1% low result. We see that the average frame rate performance did drop away a little bit for the Ryzen processors at 1440p, though interestingly they managed slightly stronger 1% low results. In fact, in our benchmark pass, the 3950X as well as the other Ryzen CPUs tested all provided very tight margins between the 1% low and average frame rates. This resulted in extremely smooth performance, though it has to be said the higher end Intel processors were also very smooth. Please note the F1 2019 results have also been updated using the DirectX 12 API, and here we find some very positive results for the 3950X as it edged out both the Core i7 9700K and Core i9 9900K, losing out only to the 9900KS by a small margin. Oddly though, increasing the resolution sees the Ryzen processors drop off a little, as well as the Core i9 9920X. And this is very much like what we saw when testing with the Division 2. It's not a massive performance drop-off, but given the 1080p results, you wouldn't expect the 3950X to be trailing almost all the Intel CPUs by a 5% margin at 1440p. The last game we're going to look at is Borderlands 3, and again, the 3950X can be seen performing very well here at 1080p. It basically matched the 9900KS, though it was no faster than the 3900X. Even at 1440p, it only matched the 3900X, and despite being 2 to 3 FPS down on the Intel CPUs, it was 1 to 2 FPS faster for the 1% low result. So while this might not be the most CPU demanding game out there, the 3950X still does very well. Here's a quick look at overclocking performance using 1.325 volts. The 3950X ran 100% stable at an all-core frequency of 4.3 GHz. It's possible I could have pushed it to 4.4 GHz, but with limited time to validate the overclock, I stopped at 4.3 GHz. Again, I also spoke with Steve from Gamers Nexus, and he tells me he got 4.4 GHz using the same 1.325 volts. So perhaps I have to play around a little bit with the LLC to stabilize my CPU at that frequency, or maybe he just did really well with the Silicon Lottery. Either way, we still broke the 10K barrier with a score of 10,046 points. So that's a 9% performance bump. We also found by simply enabling PBO that this boosted performance by 5%. The gains in Blender were a little more mild. Here PBO boosted performance by 3%, while the manual overclock improved things by a 7% margin. So if you're after maximum performance at the cost of absolutely everything, heat, power, all that stuff, then overclocking the 3950X, I guess it would make sense. But if you care about efficiency, then it really doesn't. For the small 3 to 5% performance increase that PBO offered, you're looking at over a 25% increase in total system consumption, and then almost a 40% increase for the 4.3 GHz manual overclock. Again, due to very limited time, I don't have a whole heap of thermal data for the 3950X, at least not with a range of different cooling solutions. For now, I just have thermal data with the custom Corsair HydroX loop, and for comparison, I have the Ryzen 9 3900X. Stock, the 3950X peaked at just 64 degrees after an hour-long Blender stress test in a 21-degree room. The CPU ran at 1.15 volts and maintained a clock speed of 4025 MHz by the end of the stress test. For comparison, the 3900X peaked at 68 degrees under the same conditions, meaning the 3950X actually ran 4 degrees cooler. The 3900X did maintain a clock speed of 4100 MHz, though as we saw when measuring power consumption, the voltage was quite a bit higher, and this resulted in added heat. So basically what this means is any cooler capable of tackling the 3900X will have no issue with the 3950X. Going into this review, while very excited to finally be testing the Ryzen 9 3950X, I wasn't really expecting any surprises. It's basically a 3900X with 4 extra cores. So all things being equal, it'll be up to 33% faster, and we certainly saw that in applications such as 7-zip and Blender, for example. But when it came time to measure power consumption, that's when I discovered just how impressive the 3950X really is. I'm still quite blown away by the fact that despite offering almost 30% more performance, the 3950X consumed a few less watts than the 3900X. The 3950X really showcased what's possible with TSMC's 7nm process. And this big improvement in silicon quality really does make that 12% price premium you pay per core for the 3950X over the 3900X worth it. As a side note though, if you do match the 3900X and 3950X's clock speeds and their voltage, the 16-core model does consume around 30 to 40% more power, and this is obviously what you'd expect to see given that it packs 33% more cores. Over the past month or so, a lot of you have been asking us whether you should wait for the 3950X or just snap up a discounted 2950X, and our advice has been just to wait for the 3950X reviews, and I'm happy we made that suggestion given how great the 3950X is. Right now, the 2950X retails for about $680 US, depending on where you look, and while that does make it around 10% cheaper than the 3950X, it's also around 30% slower, and it pushes total system consumption around 30% higher. So in terms of performance and efficiency, the 2950X really is hugely inferior. Of course, the Threadripper part does offer more PCIe lanes, so you'd obviously consider that part if you require the extra lanes. Meanwhile, the 3950X has the advantage of cheaper motherboards. You can throw this thing on a decent B450 board for a little over $100 US, and I'll actually be doing that in a video very soon. Meanwhile, a decent X399 board costs around $300 US. So I feel for most people, the 3950X and 3900X have put down the first and second gen Threadripper series. As for Intel, while the 3950X is clearly a much better CPU than the Core i9 9920X, especially given Intel's 12-core model currently costs $1,050 US. However, that part will shortly be refreshed as the Core i9-10920X for $700 US, and while the 12-core Intel CPU consumes a similar level of power, it's often heavily outgunned when it comes to performance. There are instances where the 10920X will win, but only by a slim margin, while there are plenty more instances where the 3950X completely buries it. Therefore, for a similar level of performance, you'll need to spend at least $800 on the 10940X, and then to beat it, $1,000 US on the 10980XE. So before those parts even arrive, Intel already appears to be on the back foot. It's crazy to think that we now have a mainstream AMD AM4 part that can rival and really outcompete the best high-end desktop CPUs Intel has to offer. This also explains why 3rd gen Threadripper is going to be so damn expensive. AMD really is looking to separate their mainstream and high-end desktop platforms, and that's something we didn't think they'd be able to achieve with a 16-core mainstream part. But with the $1,400 US 24-core 3960X offering more PCIe lanes than most of you will know what to do with, and twice the L3 cache of the 3950X, 3rd gen Threadripper is going to be truly high-end desktop stuff. Of course, we won't get to evaluate 3rd gen Threadripper till later this month, along with Intel's Cascade Lake X series, but for now I am seriously impressed with what the 3950X offers at the $750 US price point. It's an exceptionally good option for anyone after a powerful 16-core processor, or just a powerful desktop processor. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, you can subscribe, like, do all that YouTubey stuff. You can also join us over on Patreon if you want to get more involved with the channel. Some cool perks over there, Discord chat, live stream, heap of other stuff. You've probably heard me give that spiel a million times now. Also, merch, we have that, mugs, hoodies, t-shirts, lots of stuff. We're always adding new things, so check that out if you're interested. And yeah, that's going to do it for this one. I'm slightly sick at the moment, and I only had 2 days to get this video done, so sorry if it's not up to our usual standard. But of course, I can do lots of follow-up testing. We're going to be doing B350, B450 motherboards. Who knows what else? There'll be tons more Ryzen 9 3950X content coming, along with a heap of other stuff. And then, of course, like I said, we have Cascade Lake X, so there'll be some Intel goodness, Threadripper, all that stuff. But anyway, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.